All right. So for part one here, we're going to be building a modern data stack. Part two, we're going to be chatting about setting up your data team. And part three, we're going to be going over systems thinking. And then we're going to have our live Q&A. So first, for building your modern data stack, I'm very excited to introduce Bruce. Bruce, if you want to hop in and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name is Bruce Sandell, and I'm a partner sales engineer on the alliances team at Looker, supporting all of our technology partners. And I'm also on the cloud partner engineering team at Google, primarily working with partners on Google BigQuery. I've been working with databases, data warehouses for over 20 years, and I've had roles in IT, engineering, consulting, customer support, and sales. One fun fact about me is that I once took a temporary job as a dog washer in exchange for a baby python. And today I'll be talking about the components of the modern data stack.
Awesome, we're excited to have you here, Bruce. So first question here is, we're talking about modern data stacks. Can you talk a little bit more about what we're actually talking about? What is a modern data stack?
Sure. A modern data stack consists of a set of tools that help businesses maximize the value of their data. The main features that distinguish a modern data stack from a legacy data stack are flexibility, scalability, and ease of use. The majority of tools used in the modern data stack are cloud-based, minimizing the need to focus on infrastructure management. Many of the tools are also low-code or no-code, and many of them are based on open source projects, which makes them both easily accessible and easy to use. And to borrow a quote directly from Veronica's ebook, a modern data stack turns raw data into valuable insights.
Awesome. So we'd love to get some of your insider tips about building a modern data stack and the components.
For sure. So a modern data stack is made up of a few key components. I'm not going to go into too much detail about these, but a brief introduction will lay the foundation for what we'll discuss next. I'm also not going to talk about specific vendors or their advantages. As an employee of Looker and now Google, I'm very aware of my own biases. So in Veronica's ebook, there is a list of some of the more prominent players in each category if you need a reference. So these primary components are number one, your data sources. This is the information that's required to run your business and can come from any number of sources, including on-prem databases, ERP and CRM systems, files, spreadsheets, SaaS applications, and more. Recent estimates say that on average, companies with more than 1,000 employees use over 170 SaaS applications. Next is your data warehouse. You need a place to store all of that data to provide your users with a single unified source of truth. You'll need a way to get the data from your source systems into the data warehouse, and those are your data pipelines. You'll probably use multiple tools for this, depending on how the data sources are accessed, the frequency with which the data needs to be updated in your warehouse. So is a periodic batch upload sufficient, or do you need streaming updates to support near-time analytics? Next is a way to transform the data. This may be a separate tool or set of tools, or the functionality may be built into your data pipelining tool or your BI tool. But in either case, you need to get the data in a format that's easy for your users to understand and work with. And finally, the BI tool to help you find the signal in the noise and visualize and share your insights. This is the basic set of tools for a modern data stack, but it's really only the beginning. For those that have been around long enough to remember the beginning of Hadoop, it started out as little more than HDFS and MapReduce, and suddenly a huge ecosystem of complementary tools grew around it. This is similar to the rise of the modern data stack that we've been discussing. As its adoption has grown over the last several years, so has the ecosystem of supporting tools to make it even more effective, efficient, and easier to use. One of the benefits of my partner-facing role is that I get to work with a lot of these companies as these new applications are being developed and brought to market, and then see the impact that they have once they're released. For example, most large companies use multiple BI tools, have hundreds or thousands of reports, and it's a real challenge for users to identify which reports they should be using, which tables they should be using for creating their own reports, or how to identify the sources of the data that they're using. This need gave rise to applications focused exclusively on helping users make sense of the data resources available to them. A few years ago, we worked with a couple of the companies in this new area of data discovery, data catalog, and data lineage applications. And now we work with more than a dozen. Would you know if your data pipeline ran successfully with no errors, but loaded much less data than expected? A data observability tool can help with that. Is your pipeline loading the correct amount of data, but suddenly unexpected values are showing up in your data? A data quality tool can help with that. The latest market map of tools that I've seen related to the BI and analytics landscape now includes more than 50 different categories. So my recommendation is to start out with the basics, but just be aware that if you find an area of your data stack that could be improved, or if your users are asking for additional features and functionality, chances are good that there's already a tool available to enhance your data stack and meet those needs. And if there isn't, there's likely to be soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bruce. So moving to the next slide here, we'd love to ask you some questions. So are there common issues that you've seen as companies are transitioning to a modern data stack?
Yes, definitely. We'll sometimes see smaller companies that have a fear of commitment and feel like they can protect themselves from vendor lock-in by using tools in the most generic way possible, so that if they decide later that they made the wrong decision, they can minimize the amount of rework required. An example that we commonly see is companies writing SQL that doesn't take advantage of some of the built-in extensions provided by the data warehouse. I'd encourage you to use the opposite approach. Maximize your investment by taking advantage of every relevant feature that's provided. Those features are probably why you decided on the tool in the first place. I can pretty much guarantee that given the choice between a static table showing users with their city, state, and zip versus a fully interactive map showing user density and spending patterns, your users will have a much better experience with the interactive map. Whether it's geospatial functionality, advanced scientific functions, or built-in machine learning, take advantage of it all to enhance the user's experience. With larger companies, particularly fast-growing ones, we sometimes see the opposite issue. They get hyper-focused on the tooling. What's the latest, fastest, most scalable, most feature-rich product that we can bring in? You want to make sure that you're always keeping your eyes on the prize, which for analytics is delivering the data that your users need when, where, and how they need it. Having the most cutting-edge data stack doesn't always equate to satisfying your user requirements, and that should always be your primary focus.
Awesome. Next question here. So what is one of the benefits of migrating to a modern data stack that may not be immediately obvious?
So one of the benefits is that there's a lot less time spent on managing infrastructure, and this typically opens up a lot more time for innovation. One of the areas where we see a lot of this innovation focused is on embedded analytics. More and more companies are taking their analytics beyond the BI tools and static reports and embedding the data experiences into their corporate intranets or embedding visualizations into the tools that their users are spending most of their time in, like Salesforce or Zendesk. We see more custom web portals for presenting current accurate data to customers, partners, and vendors, and an increasing number of customers finding innovative ways to monetize this data. These are all great examples of delivering data when, where, and how your users need it, whether they're external users or internal users. Your data teams will be a lot happier spending their time adding value to their users and less time monitoring and repairing broken data pipelines.
Awesome. And final question for you here, is there any other advice that you'd like to share with everyone looking to build out a modern data stack here?
Sure. As you're beginning to build out your modern data stack, and your focus should be on empowering your users to imagine, explore, experiment, and enlighten, don't forget that there's a world of data outside of your corporate systems. I'd like to encourage you to look outside of your own walls for data that may benefit your users. Over the last couple of years, there's been a huge increase in the amount of data sets available. The market for data providers is becoming increasingly competitive, which can only benefit you. Every cloud provider has a library of public data sets, and the number of pay-per-use data sets has grown rapidly over the last couple of years. As the market for data has grown, ease of use has increased as well. Many of these data providers make it simple for you to bring the data into your data warehouse with just a few clicks and maybe a corporate credit card. Imagine how much more insight your users could get out of their data if they're able to combine it with local demographics data, weather data, anonymized data from companies similar to your own, Nielsen ratings, or any other of the thousands of data sets that are available. Your users will thank you for enriching their data experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bruce. Moving into our next topic here, just as important as building your data stack is setting up your data team. So to speak on setting up the data team, we have Fivetran's own Veronica Zai.
Hi everyone, my name is Veronica Zai. I'm currently a Principal Analytics Product Manager at Fivetran. I'm really excited to be here. A little bit about me, I started my career as an option trader at JP Morgan, and I went on to build their first modern data stack. Through this experience, I discovered one of my biggest pain points was that I saw that enterprises was building their custom data pipelines that took a long time to build and was often quite inefficient. And that's how I discovered Fivetran. Really believe in Fivetran's mission in making access to data as simple and as reliable as electricity. Over the last year, I helped scale our team from less than 10 to 25 people now and help design the structure, the process, and engagement model to ensure that analytics is the highest leverage asset to turbocharge Fivetran's growth. And today, I'm really excited to talk to you about how to successfully build a data team. A little bit of fun fact about me, I can eat more steak than most guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Veronica, and apologies for the mispronunciation there. So first thing here, we'd love to talk about, why is a data team so important?
I think today I will focus on the why as well as the insider story of how Fivetran successfully scaled our team. A lot of the success we have at Fivetran is because there is a data-led growth approach that is set from the top. I would like to borrow a quote from our CEO, George Fraser. He's once said, if your data team should be one of the highest, your CEO's highest leverage asset. If you are a CEO and you do not feel like you have such a weapon, then you really need to seriously invest and support your organization to make it happen. And if you are an analytics leader, you should be working with organization or CEO that has such conviction and work with your C-suite to create alignment and investment from the top. A little bit about how Fivetran were able to scale our team successfully. When I joined Fivetran about a year ago, we were still a small team, and the biggest problem that we encountered was how can we scale the analytics org to support Fivetran that had been tripling and doubling revenue and headcount every year? And we were tasked with solving a few issues. One, the analytics org is extremely technical and overwhelms at the same time because quite often your analytics team is doing every org's work. You might be covering revenue and FP&A, engineering teams, logic building, or even sales commission and some revenue operation work. I've observed a lot of data team being spread really thin because they were helping every org. Secondly, we also had decentralized data analysts that were embedded in every org. And because of that, we experienced incohesive data strategies and execution. To improve our overall strategy and execution, we designed a few features that help us reorg the team and improve our operation. First, we designed a centralized org with a hub and spoke model with functionally alignment with each department, because this really helped us align incentive and execution with each org. Secondly, we streamline the processes anywhere from request intake to biweekly sprint process to frequent stakeholder meetings, as well as quarterly planning to truly streamline execution. And we approached this engagement from two perspectives. From the top, we identify the most important stakeholders with each organization, as well as data sponsors, to work with them to create strategy and alignment. On the other hand, we created these dedicated office hours that are dedicated to everyone at Fivetran, such that we can also help the line ICs to improve their operation and help with their decision making. Lastly, we were very prescriptive and disciplined about what we do, and more importantly, what we don't do as a data organization. We're a data org, we're not a revenue operation org, we're not an engineering org, we're not a finance and FP&A org. We're very proactive about collaborating with all of the partner organizations to figure out what is the highest levers that our data team can produce. And that has really help us scale our team to the enterprise level. A year later now, we have 70% of the daily active users who are using, who are in the BI tools. And our satisfaction survey also went up from 3.9 to 4.3 on a 5-point scale, which is a significant improvement in engagement with all orgs because of the focus on processes that we have created.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Veronica. We at Fivetran are so lucky to have you. So moving into picking your brain about some insider tips on building and managing your data team. What do you look for in a data hire?
That's a great question. We really look for two pillars of skill when we think about a data hire. One pillar is the technical skill, and we think about technical skill in can they be technical and can they be analytical. We think of technical skill mostly around their SQL ability, because the introduction of all of these modern data tools really decrease the barrier for entry. So if you are a professional with great SQL skills, you have a very high chance of landing a great opportunity. The other pillar of technical skill is analytical skill, is how much of a logical thinking and analytical thinking skill that you have, because a lot of the day-to-day job requires doing data analysis and helping each organization making decisions on their operation. The other side of the pillar is the soft skills. The most important soft skills that we look for is communication skill, because as a data professional, you will be interfaced with both executives as well as the line ICs. So having amazing communication skill to be able to create alignment, prioritize problems, and communicate recommendations for decision making is also very critical.
Amazing. Next question here. What's a common mistake that people make when they're trying to hire data professionals, and how can it be avoided?
So we just talked about all the toolbox that we look for from any data professionals. I think the biggest mistake that a lot of organizations have is the desire to look for unicorns and does not prioritize what's most realistic for the type of company that you are. Right now, the job market is really hot. We literally hired more than 10 people in the last 6 months, and we know that is extremely competitive. And I think every company wanted to hire a unicorn hires that has both good technical skill and communication skill, but that often is not a case, especially if you are a early stage startup. So we would recommend that you prioritize the skills that are most important to you, because a lot of the skills can be trained on the job. The data visualization skills, learning SQL, and even writing data transformations. So the most important feedback that we had for you is have a scorecard and prioritize the skills that are most important to you, and be willing to let go of some of the other skills and be willing to train people on the job.
Awesome. And final question here. In the ebook, which, as I said, will be sent out at the end of the presentation, there's a whole section about how important the first 180 days are. Can you give some more detail onto how to set a foundation for success with a data team?
Absolutely. The most important thing that I wanted to reiterate is that alignment from the top. The whole point of creating a modern data stack is such that you can create a centralized system where you can operationalize the operation of each department, as well as create optimization. So having that alignment from the top, having that investment from C-suites is absolutely critical. Number one thing is, I've seen a lot of smaller companies. I think about smaller companies as companies with less than 1,000 people that have doesn't have a centralized data org, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, because the whole point of having a modern data stack is such that you can centralize information to create optimization. So having disparate resource embedded in each org really prevents the company from scaling really fast. Lastly, I really recommend that you all focus on creating the right engagement model with the peers. Work with them to learn about what they do, what they don't do, and draw a circle of the responsibilities of the data team. And more importantly, what is it that a data team not do, to make sure that every org can focus on what they're best at.
Wonderful. All right, and then why should data teams be run as R&D teams, and how do you manage a team in this lens?
We've shared a lot of the actual technique of how to think about running the data team as an R&D team, and today I just wanted to focus on why it is important to think about the data team as a combination of product team, engineering team, and customer success. Because quite often, a lot of folks think about it in a more silo way. But I think it's important to think about running a data team like a product, because you want it to be driving data adoption and increase operational efficiencies. And it's important to run it as an engineering org, because there's a lot of value from running a efficient engineering org, because there's a lot of focus on efficiency and velocity by using these engineering principles, such as peer review and biweekly sprint and so forth. Lastly, this is going back to what Bruce was talking about. The goal of the data team ultimately is to drive exceptional data experience, to empower every business user to make the decision that are good for the organization in the long term. So it's also very important to think about the engagement model and how to drive a good user experience.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your insights there. So moving forward into our last section here, we're going to talk about systems thinking, and we've got the head of data from Hightouch here to talk to you a little bit about that today.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Pedram. I'm the head of data here at Hightouch. I do everything from managing our internal data stack, working with our internal data people, and contributing to various open source tools like Permafrost, and just creating content that I think will be useful to data people out there. My fun fact is I'm on Twitter at Pedram Naveed, and I post a bunch of data memes. So if you want to see something funny, follow me there. Been a data engineer, data scientist in a past life, and today I'll be talking about systems thinking and working with business teams. I
Excellent.
really
So
have
we'd
two
love,
tips. Oh,
oh,
sorry,
sorry,
go.
go ahead. I was just cueing you in there. We'd love to hear a little bit more about systems thinking.
Yeah, so really one tip to share here about systems thinking is all about how you can step back from the day-to-day to leverage systems thinking. I'll start it with a story about how I got into data engineering. A while back, I was hired as the first data scientist at a small startup. Initially, I was just building models to help predict attributes about households. Every model was custom built for each customer, and that meant we had to make sure the model building process was really efficient. When we started growing rapidly, we hired more junior data scientists, and quickly I noticed that our new hires, they were excellent at doing the data modeling process, the data science work. In fact, they were much better than I was. But what they lacked was experience with deploying the models into production, getting prediction scores, generating CSV files. And so for us, one approach we could have taken would have been maybe the naive approach to say, okay, well, let's just help these data scientists learn as much as possible so that they can be better at their jobs about the ins and outs of our systems, right? And that might help them deploy models a little bit better and a little bit faster. The other approach we could have taken would have been to say, okay, well, let's only hire more senior data scientists. Let's hire the best in the field, the ones who have years of experience breaking data models into production. But I didn't love either of those two ideas. What I wanted my data scientists focusing on is what they do best, which is building great models. They were really good at finding ways to get maximum value for our customers by doing that. And so that's the work they wanted to do. That's the work they loved. And that's the work that kept them motivated. And so my goal was to try and find a way to keep that going as much as possible. So what I did is really just step back from the day-to-day data modeling process and think about the system as a whole. And what I ended up doing was building a platform for the data scientists to simplify all that incidental complexity in the system. The platform let them do things like upload models using the tools they're already familiar with. And there was a front end and a back end that sort of took care of the rest. And all they could do is click a few buttons and retrain models and get scores that way. There was no need for them to know about things like how Kubernetes works or how our CI pipeline worked. All they did was focus on what they knew how to do best, which is build models that delivered a lot of value. And so the end result there is like increased productivity, happier customers. The data team was getting a lot of accolades, and they were able to focus on what they do best without getting bogged down in the minutiae of infrastructure. Too often, I've seen all the work our data people go through to get into the warehouse, and it goes to waste because activating that data can be really hard sometimes. Often we hit what I call the so what syndrome. You put a bunch of data, dashboards, reports into your processes, but so what? What you're not doing is you're not personalizing content for your prospects, you're not tracking conversions, you're not enriching data in your CRMs for your sales teams. And so to me, systems thinking is all about how you can sort of step back from the process and address that. You start asking yourself if you can find ways to remove friction. Maybe it's by building a custom integration in-house. Maybe it's using an off-the-shelf solution like Hightouch. But once you start doing that, you can really start scaling the capabilities of your organization.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So moving into our questions here. So asking the right questions.
Yeah.
So first question here. So what are some of the biggest blind spots that you see when building out a modern data stack?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say there's a few things people often don't think about when building out their stack. The first one is the difference between development and maintenance. Development can often be fun and exciting work. People like building out stacks. But once you've finished setting up your ingestion, your warehouse, your BI tools, and your reverse ETL flows, don't underestimate the maintenance costs. You'll want to spend a lot of time ensuring the quality of your pipelines aren't going to suffer in the future. So, as much as possible, invest the time upfront to build robust tests, good documentation, and automation. When you're first starting, if you have time to work on things, spend it on that first because as you start to ramp up, you'll find you're going to get requests and you'll be inundated with more and more work to do, and you'll have less time to spend on fixing those problems that would have been a lot easier to start with.
Excellent. Next question here. When should I start thinking about building out a modern data stack?
Yeah, well, I would love to say it's never really too early to start. That's not always true. You definitely want to have product market fit before going out and buying a data warehouse, for example. You want to sort of get into the cadence of understanding your product and how it works and capturing some of that data. And then once you've sort of established that, I think you probably want to start thinking about finding ways to capture that data, report on it, and analyze it. And my tip here is really start with a good data hire early on. It'll save you a lot of headache down the road. The number one thing I see with companies is they start this transition too late. And so what they have is really unhappy people in finance and marketing and sales, and really frustrated people in engineering who maybe don't have the right business context or the right domain knowledge to understand how to model data properly for their business users. And so getting a data hire in early, probably like a solid data engineer, and then growing into a data analyst, data analytics engineer from there is probably what I would advise.
Perfect. And how can I go beyond just servicing requests for my business partners and stakeholders?
Yeah, this is a great question too. This isn't a solved problem. A lot of good people are talking about this still to this day. And I do think there will be a place for data practitioners to always serve requests from their partners. I don't think things like self-serve, for example, will totally take that away. But I do think it's important for data teams to think like product teams. The more you can ask probing questions when you get requests, the better you can come up with a system of prioritization to work with your stakeholders. Maybe it's an approach like Kanban or something. The more flexibility you can have in managing your backlog and negotiating with them, the better I think you'll be as a data team and a data person. The data team itself is a finite resource. There's only so much types of work you can do. So working on things that deliver the maximum value rather than things that may seem urgent but maybe aren't that important is I think critical, especially early on when your data team might be one or two.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much, Bruce, Veronica, and Pedram for your insights there. We wanted to give some time to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. Looks like we already have some coming in here, but would love to give everyone a moment just to submit any questions they may have. All right. It looks like we do have a question here for Veronica. Can you speak more to things that you think data teams shouldn't do?
I think when I talk to head of data at a lot of companies, because the data team is really technical, you end up taking on a lot of the responsibilities of other organizations. One thing that a data team shouldn't do is if there's any information about the production systems that should be built for by your engineering team. Using Fivetran as an example, because our team was very agile, we end up building the revenue by using the monthly active roles of each customer use, leveraging our pricing model to project the revenue. And these are the core operation system that really should be built into your engineering system, not your data stack. A lot of the data team also end up covering the operational aspects of other team. For example, sales, commission, or revenue operation. So these are another example where you wanted to avoid because you wanted your operators system team to focusing on building these systems, having your data team focusing on building insights and working with stakeholders to do analyses for decision makings.
Thank you so much. Awesome. All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. The recording of this will be sent to everybody at the conclusion of the webinar. I really want to thank, Bruce, Veronica, and Pedram again for sharing their insights. And if any other questions come up, please feel free to email us at Fivetran, and we'll be happy to pass them along. Thank you so much, everybody.